Welcome back. We're taking a look at Hebrews, and today we're in chapter 1, verse 6. I'm George Dillard, and this is...
Yeah, and I'm Rex Wisely, so we're just glad to be with you guys today.
You know, just one of the things that maybe you don't know is that Rex and I both attended and graduated from Atlanta Christian College. We both went to Emmanuel Theological Seminary, which is part of Milligan College. So we have a background that is common, and even though Rex is...
We didn't go at the same time,
yeah,
by the way. Yeah,
Rex wants to be sure you understand that he's a decade behind me.
Yeah, and you graduated.
I did graduate.
Okay, never mind. All right.
I'm living proof that anybody can get higher education.
There you go.
There you
That's
go.
Right.
And so let me read verses 6 and 7 for us, and then we'll take a moment and talk about them. Again, when God brings his firstborn into the world, he says, "Let all the angels worship him." And speaking of the angels, he says, he makes his angels winds, his servants flames of fire. You know, we talked about it last week, how this portion of the letter to the Hebrews is establishing the supremacy of Jesus, because there could be a tendency in this particular age and time for them to see him as a prophet, as a teacher.
Right, a great teacher.
Right.
Right.
But there's more to the story than that.
For sure.
And
yeah.
And so
yeah, he's kind of spelling it out and making sure there's no question about it.
No question whatsoever, just because he's going to establish this so that he can go into some deeper things. And there's a really neat passage that we'll get to in Hebrews chapter 6. But right now, you know, I thought of the song that says, you know, talks about the angels worshiping and standing in amazement and looking at the birth of Jesus. You know, I wonder sometimes what were the angels thinking about God's grace and mercy and forgiveness and love?
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, obviously we don't know what that is.
We don't, but
you wonder if they were blown away. I mean, when we look at it and we go, man, how could God do that? Like, how could he be so filled with grace to do that? And like, you wonder if they thought similar things.
Yeah, I mean, I have to think that they're in some respects, they're standing there thinking, you know, I wouldn't do this. You know,
Right.
You know.
Right. Well, I've heard you say from the pulpit many times, I wouldn't
have saved us.
Right.
You know, yeah, we got to start over.
We got to go with another plan.
Yeah. But God, that's just a reaffirmation that God's plan is perfect, and that there's no second guessing on his part. There is no hesitation on his part, and that his plan is perfect. So, you know, let the angels worship him, and then to firm up, you know, how powerful Jesus is. He says, hey, this is what angels are. They're a wind, and they're flames of fire. You know, it's trying to, in human terms, describe this spiritual being that we call angels, and the power and the majesty of them. And this verse is it should be familiar to the Hebrews.
I mean, it's from Psalm 104, right? Verse 4.
Verse 4.
And so when the writer brings this up, it should be one that they understand, that they've heard, they've passed down, and that they've probably read several times.
So it again, it's conferring on them the nature of God's plan and how far in advance this was set. And then he goes on to say in verse 7, in speaking of the angels, so he is making sure that they understand the power and that God exerted to save us. That he didn't just send anybody.
Yeah, he sent the best, right?
He sent the Alpha and the Omega. And then he goes on in verse 8 and says, but about this Son, he says, your throne, O God, will last forever and ever, and righteousness will be the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has set you above your companions by anointing you with the oil of joy. One thing that stands out to me, Rex, in this passage is this notion that there is a divine order in the universe, and Jesus is head over everything. In fact, the Apostle Paul addresses that in a couple places in the epistles, and he establishes for us that Jesus is the head of the church. And so, when you think about that, what does that mean for you? I mean, when you hear that Jesus is the head of everything, that he's the head of the church.
Well, I mean, just everything falls down under him.
Right.
And you look at Hebrews later on, we'll get to that. He even compares Jesus as being the great high priest. He talks about in Hebrews 4. And so, I just think it means that everything is under him. There's nothing on the same level as him. Everything is below him.
Right. And one of the things that I think about when I say it says he's above his companions, some of the apostles are still alive. And if you think about it, with the things we read about them, they're healing the sick, raising the dead, performing all types of miracles and things. And so, there's also the element that these Hebrews think that, man, these apostles are pretty great, and they're pretty powerful, and so.
And yet, they don't compare, right?
They don't compare at all.
Yeah, you are correct, but they don't. Yeah, they don't hold a candle, so to speak, right?
Right, which says to me, it's establishing that Jesus comes because of the Father's love. For God so loved the world. And I think it's demonstrating, at least to me, that how powerful and how important his love is.
Well, and first, I think in Philippians 2, that's a passage that we look at often and talk about his love and what he laid down for us. And so we're talking about Jesus' supremacy, and yet he laid down all of where he was at for us. Everything.
Everything. Emptied himself. Well, so I think that's quite a bit for us to think about. That's about all of our time today. So for Rex and myself, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week.